Yeah, I'll call the meeting for the neighbors of Dunn County to order. We're meeting here at 9 a.m. on Thursday, October 31st, Halloween. And we have everyone here except Sheila Story, which she'll be here soon. Let's go on to approval of the minutes. We have two different ones. We had that short meeting, and I think we can do these together. Thank you, Supervisor Lyon and Supervisor Laufer. And I assume there's no discussion. All in favor? Aye. It passes. And just a quick, Gordy's not online? Oh, okay, yeah. That's fine. Is there any public comment, Carmen? No? Okay. And nothing at the request of the chair. So we move right on down the agenda to Community Mentor Administrator Report. That would be Carmen. CVTC land lease. Yes, now I see why you're here. I forgot.
All right, just for a little bit of background for our new members, since Mike was the only person on this committee the last time this was done, about 5 years ago. So the land just behind the neighbors that is currently farmland is still owned by the county, and specifically the neighbors leases that land out. For the last quite a long time now, actually. And our current contract is currently with CVTC. They utilize that land for educational purposes and testing purposes. It has been approved by this committee in the past to continue that lease. That lease has come up due again. So later on in this meeting, you will all have a chance to either endorse or not endorse continuing that lease with CVTC. If we didn't endorse that lease, we would then go out to bid for that property, which would be another whole thing that we would go through as a committee, or that all of you would do. But I do have people from CVTC as well as Chase here to talk a little bit about what they use the land for and what they would do going forward. So I'll hand it over to them.
All right. Thanks, Carmen. Yes, Chase Cummings, Dunn County Land and Water Conservation Division. I've been at this here in Dunn County for about almost 4 years. And since that time, I've basically filled the shoes of Dan Prestabach, who was one of the people that helped administer and start the relationship with CVTC actually about 10 years ago. Yeah. So, again, like Carmen mentioned, this lease is up for renewal. We are a partner along with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, as well as UW Extension. And we work with CVTC to basically oversee what we call a soil health partnership team, looking at conservation practices that we can implement on agricultural land and really show it as a demonstration for the broader community, as well as the benefits and opportunities that CVTC can gain from it on their own. So we've had a really good working relationship over the years. It's been very successful. Some of you may have been to some field days out there. And I guess would state also that the lease that we're looking to sign this year is a little bit different in the sense that it was previously 5-year leases. It's being proposed as a 10-year lease just because of that relationship. We have had Corporation Counsel Jim review this, and CVTC is also having their legal look over it as well. And in general, we're going to basically proposing to continue the same thing, continue the same relationship. But I think there's a lot of value in this property and this setup. And Brent and his team are here today to kind of give a little brief background and a little brief update as to what CVTC has to offer and can provide this opportunity. So I'll turn it over to Brent.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Brent Christensen. I'm the agronomy management instructor at Chippewa Valley Technical College, and I've been with the school now about 8 or 9 years. So I've been through this process once before, and as Chase came on, we've continued to work really well together. We have a true collaboration of things that's benefiting, land and conservation, UW Extension, and also us at CVTC, and I think the community as a whole. The reason that CVTC and why this is so valuable is this is really our living working lab. And so our students come out, if they're in HVAC, for example, at CVTC, they walk out to their lab. If they're in automotive, they walk out to their lab. This is our version of that lab. And so we really value this property. It's a nice large chunk. We have some really good partners steering us in what's emerging and what's coming in technology and conservation practices, so that we're doing what we need to in teaching our students. So the students, I'll give you just a really brief overview, and then I'm going to turn it over to two really good students here today. So our students, part of their bigger project is whether they come from farms or usually don't get to make the management decisions from choosing a seed, choosing fertilizer, and this is their opportunity to do that. So they're broken into teams. They get to actually work together, choose their own seed. They follow our crop rotation that we work together on, and then they get to do the work. And ultimately, they get to see if was that profitable? Was that a good decision? And it's really a good, safe place for them to learn. By the time we get out into industry, that could be a pretty costly thing for them. So we do our best to keep the crops looking really good. We take care of everything, but also understanding that it's their working lab and we're going to make mistakes. That's part of the educational process. So I'm going to turn it over to Savannah and Skylar. They're going to just quickly share their story and really what this farm means to them.
So good morning. My name is Skylar Ferris. I'd be considered what I guess is a non-traditional student for CVTC or in general. 33 years old now, a couple kids, and I actually don't come from an ag background at all. What led me to this program is I actually started a company with drones. I provide chemicals on top of crops with drones, but coming from no ag background, I didn't know how to have that conversation with farmers, or even what was going on with the crop. I just knew drones. So that led me in the winter to come take courses with Brent. And I've picked up a lot in the last 2 years. And having this land available to us is, we can sit in a classroom in a room like this and talk about theories all day long, but until you do real world applications, and having this available to us actually gives us the tools to make decisions ourselves and try stuff. And there's a lot of things having this land available to us as students that I don't think could have picked up. For instance, working with land and conservation, and also having, we had Matt Zosky from Department of Ag from DATCAP come out this year in the field and show us what he's looking for during his inspections and going through stuff with the class. So without having land available to us, or, a place to do it, none of that would be a possibility, honestly. So, yeah, just a quick recap of where we're at. So thank you.
Good morning. My name is Savannah Harshman. I also don't come from an ag background, and being able to come out and be on the farm and have a chance to be in the seat of equipment and learning the technology that's behind it and how they use it on this farm versus other farms. This land is a lot to the students. All of us that are in the teams, we make the decisions when it comes down to it at the end of the year, who made the best decisions. And so it makes for a fun competition throughout. But without the land, that wouldn't be possible for any of the students to have that type of experience. Some of us come from small dairy farms where we don't have access to equipment that we see here on the farm and that they bring out.
And I'll just quickly add that, one of our big, as we went into this last lease renewal, Chase and I and the rest of the team really wanted to make sure that we involved the community. We wanted to show off what we were doing. We are farming responsibly, and we're trying to teach others that that's, very possible, and we can be profitable doing so. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I would just add the other component to this. So obviously there's clear opportunity and benefit to the students and to that organization and potentially to our community. We also use the farm in other ways for research purposes too. So right now we currently have groundwater lysimeters on the property. So that's looking at groundwater quality underneath a soil health cropping system. So trying to also provide information to the broader community, the broader farming community, about different ways that we can be thinking about things. And it's really easy for people like us and our agency to go out and say, hey, you should do cover crops and you should do no-till and you should do this and you should do that and do this in nutrient management. But having the ability to point to farms, and specifically a farm that's being managed by students and showing the success of that farm, is pretty valuable in the community as well. We have our other additional partners through our farmer-led watershed groups in the county that are also being involved in this to some degree, which is valuable in the sense of providing some other perspective. So I look forward to the continued partnership, and I guess I'll open this up for any questions or discussion you might want to have.
President Farmer, Tim, had you known about this before?
No, I didn't. Back when the nursing home used to be in place and they used to run the farm there with the dairy end of things and stuff, I probably moved up here about the time that they were finishing that or dispersing of it. And, but I've farmed all my life and everything. So, and I went to Madison to the ag college down there. So I've had a diverse amount of education in this area and got to participate at Madison at UW down there. The information that you glean from your programs, is that passed on to state departments, and how much of the influence that you folks have influences our politicians as far as what kind of influence it would come down to put either restrictions on farmers or actually benefit farmers in a way that would maintain their freedom to farm as they best see fit on their own land. You understand what I'm asking you?
Yeah, so I would say a lot of the information that we take from this, it's really widespread. So it could be, students taking their own individual, but then we also have things that Chase is doing on his end, that we're collecting with the lysimeters, and that is getting spread out statewide. Jerry with UW Extension did a nitrogen trial. It's something we'll utilize ourselves, but it's also being replicated throughout the state. So it becomes, in that case, a data point. Do we have any real influence on some of the legislation? I'd like to think so. But have I seen that firsthand? Probably not. I think that we're showing those good practices locally. So we know what some of the things are to conserve our water here, to make sure that we have good quality water around the areas. That's always a concern. And I think that we're trying to localize first before we take that, let's take care of home first, if that makes sense.
The machinery you talked about that you get to farm the ground with or put that in, do you do that from local companies?
Absolutely. Here? Yeah, that's one of the partnerships. So through Tractor Central here locally, as well as Johnson Tractor, they donate the equipment at no cost to us so that the students can use it. It's new, it's brand new, or just gently used so that they can have the brand new technology. We collect data, on yield and moisture and all that kind of good stuff. And then our seed companies are also all local. So everyone that we work with here, from soil sampling all the way up to equipment, everyone is local to Dunn County or nearby in the Chippewa Valley.
Is that all donated to the seeds and everything?
It is not, no. So we do pay for fertilizer, chemical, we pay our own fuel. We do pay for pretty much everything except for we don't own the majority of the equipment. We have a few pieces that we own, so.
Is that all put out on bids then for different companies to bid for selling?
No. So in this case, we run an enterprise. So we choose relationships. So I want to work with people who are going to help the students. And so, our seed dealers they have to come in, they have to present to our students, they have to show the value of their product, and then ultimately buy, but no bid process there at all. It's just strictly relationship.
Mm-hmm. And then do you use a wide variety of chemicals when you spray the crops then too, so that you test to see which one's more effective and which isn't? And
so we follow recommendations of course, our team here. We know what we had for issues last year, and then we've been working with Synergy Co-op, and we follow their recommendations, and I don't know that we've always followed it because the students have their opinions as well. So we make sure we're following just good practices, changing up our modes of action to make sure that we don't have resistances like we're hearing about and seeing in the industry.
Mm-hmm. And then does the harvest, the seeds that you harvest, is that used to be tested on animals to see the adverse effects or the beneficial effects of the different types of seeds, whether they
Nope.
be,
Not in this case, no. So we sell it just like any other farmer would. And this is probably where we're like any other farmer in that regard. Minus we don't market our grain. We sell cash sale or we store for a short time, but sold like any others. Usually if I'm being quite honest, if we can break even on the farm, knowing that we've made some mistakes along the way, we're really happy. So we have to make enough to be sustainable for the following years.
and how many acres is there in this lease program? Do you lease it by the acre or do you lease
Yes.
it by a
Yep.
total?
It's leased by the acre.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead. Or so, yeah, basically it's 135 acres, 133 acres that is owned by the county. And then the city has a couple parcels that are mixed in the mix. So that's a separate agreement that CVTC would have with the city. So, yeah, basically it's on a per acre basis. So,
Mhm.
yep.
And then how much per acre?
Yeah, right now it's about $72 an acre, which is, you could say cheap, but I think the benefits and the opportunities that that come with the agreement, I think support a higher value.
Will you be negotiating again on a new lease amount or, I mean, per acre amount being, it seems like at least
Yeah.
out in the real world where I'm at, land has been going for
It is.
more
It
than
is.
that,
We're going to propose, and we did some work looking at like CRP rates and some of the other things in the county. We're going to propose $76 an acre. There's no doubt in my mind you could go out and put this for bid and get substantially more. But again, like Chase said, the value there. So we're going to propose $76 an acre. That allows us to be sustainable over the course of hopefully that 10-year period. Again, that keeps us very competitive. Right now, we're right at that break-even point pretty much every year. So really any more than that's going to put us, in a position where things get really tough for the educational standpoint, and I have to step in more than I'd like to.
I was just gonna say you can see the dilemma that farmers are in when they're paying 200, 300 or 400 or 500 an acre for rent and then expected to turn a profit on that when they have, what the expenses are and stuff, that's part of the teaching thing that I've always wondered how much students are learning when they're not out in, the real world competitive, prices that are paid for land rent and things like that. It's not really apples to apples and, and they did the same thing with, cattle too. It's very difficult to run a dairy farm with current expenses and stuff and, which didn't reflect what I thought was a fair teaching experience to the kids because they really weren't learning what it was actually like to go out into the real world. And so I hope that somewhere in your teaching experiences, you're able to, put that in and show the kids that we're getting a really good deal on the land here and stuff, if not.
I'll add, but go ahead, Skylar.
I was gonna say, it's been mentioned. We're well aware that this is a privilege and an opportunity that we've been granted with the land. We have discussed it. We know that a lot of our classmates and other students do come from a farm background and they see it as well. But I think because of that reason, because we can save some, I guess you call it an input cost on the lease agreement, we're able to make more decisions in a field, if that makes sense. Brent talked about talking to our seed salesmen and stuff. We don't want to pick favorites through a school. So when we have these different fields and different things that are planted, we talk to seed salesmen from, is it 3 or 4 different companies? 4 different companies come into our classroom, give a presentation and a list of products, and we get to pick a seed.
Mhm.
Now, if we knew, our door for different trials and opportunities and what's this seed going to do on this soil and so forth, that's a lot more limited when we say we're putting cost over top of what we could learn here.
Mhm.
So saving a little input cost on the land helps us make those mistakes or trials later.
Mhm. Well, thank you. I appreciate all the information that you gave me.
Now, Chase, if I remember correctly, when we first started this, the soil was quite a bit different. It had been depleted, and you want to talk about that a little bit? And
Yeah.
why it was that way?
Sure. I think Brent can even probably add to this too, but since I wasn't here for the entirety of it, but yeah, I mean, basically the farm was operated under a traditional conventional system, corn soybean rotation, which it is still to this day. Through the theory of soil health practices and looking at the methods that are applicable through no-till cover crops. I guess the point is trying to build fertility in the soil naturally, treat the soil as if it would be in its natural state. And we're seeing benefits of that. We're seeing changes in soil type or soil characteristics. Brent can certainly, and the students probably can see that firsthand and probably speak more to that. But that was the intention behind this change into what we traditionally had done prior to entering into a partnership with CVTC, was to try to create an atmosphere where we can apply the principles that we're talking about through soil health, and then actually show those results over time. Now, this property and these soils are very sandy, generally speaking, so you don't see the response rates like you might in a different loamy soil. So I think it's a testament to the commitment and the long-term, I guess, focus on implementing those practices and seeing the long-term benefit, playing the long game instead of the short game. If we were just playing the short game, we probably wouldn't be doing some of those practices at all. So, but Brent, I don't know if you want to add to what you see.
Yeah, the one comment I'll add to that is that, I bring students out there. This land also allows us to have class right out in the field, which is pretty unique and pretty neat in my opinion. But so we come out there, and on the first day, I send them out and just take in the farm, look and tell me what you see. And they come back and they're like, well, we're going to do tillage. And I'm like, well, no, you're not. By the time they graduate, you want to do tillage? They've seen how this really works. And I think that just goes to show it takes some time to, the students need to learn the process, see it start to finish. And that's what this really allows.
And I would add on the tillage aspect, we do have tillage check strips out there. So the students are actually planting and managing the farm in soil that is tilled traditionally versus no-till systems. And you can see the difference, I think, almost every year. Yeah.
I know originally it was just rented out to the highest bidder. What was it like when you first got it?
Well, and so I was a couple of years after the first lease. We had a tough time growing crops. I mean, really, it was a challenge to get a good crop off of there. I would say, especially in the last 5 years, things have really, taken a turn. We grew some, probably the best crops we ever have. Now, granted, we had rain, but it is night and day difference from when I started. So, yeah, it was tough to even grow a crop.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead.
Do you use all commercial fertilizer, or do you get like turkey manure or chicken manure?
Yeah, we do.
Like
Just
that,
being close to the neighbors, number one, and then the other, being right inside the community, we stick to the commercial just from the aesthetic and smell. As much as we would like to, we've had lots of conversations that would be the next step forward, but we want to keep everyone happy.
because they do knife the stuff in now too, you avoid the smell so bad too. But I was just wondering, and then do you do samples of like organic farming, compared to conventional farming, or?
Yeah, not necessarily true organic. I wouldn't say, the one probably the closest side to that is adding in a small grain to the rotation. And that's probably the most unique, not organic, but that's probably the most unique thing that we do here is have that small grain. Lately, that's been oats. So.
And I do think part of the theory behind the soil health principles and practices is with time is looking for opportunities to reduce chemical application and even potentially fertilizer application, just based on the soil is more resilient to some of those factors. So again, soil type has a lot to do with that, and then a matter of time. So time of implementation, weather, all the factors that you obviously know. So yeah.
Yeah, you can put all the fertilizer you want on. If you don't get the rain, you aren't going to grow nothing.
Well, you got it today.
Oh yeah, we got a little today.
Oh, late, but,
yeah.
So what is the process here? Are we just saying we like the idea, or what do we do today?
So it's a little later in the agenda. There's actually a formal endorsement by this committee for us to finish the negotiations and sign a lease. So in the past, this committee has been the approving committee to say, yep, go ahead and do the land lease agreement with CVTC. And as Chase said, Jim, our new corporation counsel, has looked it over. And then as well as CVTC's counsel is looking it over as well. So this is more or less giving staff the go-ahead to negotiate and finish the lease.
Mr. Chair. I have some questions.
Yes, go right ahead, Supervisor Story.
I'm actually a farm girl from the West. And so farming is a lot different out there. My uncle had 8,000 acres of BLM land that he bought, and my father was a water master, basically, of that kind of property. So some of what I know is probably not the same as Wisconsin farming. However, water. I did, as we were talking, that did come to mind. Where do you get your water and how does that work? And
Rainfall, nothing but.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep, rainfall.
And so you are definitely subject to the elements out there. And,
We absolutely are.
and yet, did you just say you just had your best crop?
We did. We did.
Without all the-
We had a great rain, great summer, a lot of moisture. We had a great crop. We did some things differently. They made some decisions. You know, Skylar came and sprayed a fungicide on our
Everybody
corn.
brought a bucket of water. and-
Yeah, yeah. No, we had a great growing season this year.
Okay. Well, the other area, because they actually asked a lot of the questions that I was going to ask too, but is more on the outreach side. Because of what you are learning, what you are teaching, and because it could be a benefit to the county, how do you reach out to the different farming groups, the different individuals? Do you have a list of all the different farms in the county? Do you have some way of letting them all know that you exist and what you do and what you found out?
Yeah, I think, especially in the last probably 4 or 5 years, it's something that we recognize that there's room for continuous improvement on that. We do have a website. There's a lot of information that's out there on that. UW Extension, a former ag agent locally, was the one that kind of spearheaded a lot of that. She has since moved on to a different position, so we're kind of in flux here. But also we do field days out there. We do at least one field day a year for the general public. We do, the students have a number of different things that happened out there, but I think, you know, through those types of activities, as well as our, I guess, day-to-day operation within the Land and Water Conservation Division, when we're working with producers and landowners in the community, through the Natural Resources Conservation Service, another partner in this. They work with producers and landowners in the community every day as well. And we reflect on this property as a place to encourage people to go and look at. We also look at, you know, when those opportunities arise for a field day, we share that out with our producer-led watershed groups that are in the county and other means that we have connections through. So, you know, I think.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Say, I'll add one thing kind of unique to what we did over the past few years. UW Stout was out there. So John from NRCS had a group from UW Stout out doing some testing. They spent a day out there. We had a new, you know, when you think of outreach, we were trying to get creative this year. We collaborated with Menominee High School and our second year students put on their own field day for Menominee High School students that were enrolled in a business class. So we're trying to find new, unique ways to reach out and reach new audiences. And so those were just a couple examples, you know, Stouts there. We've had NRCS agents from all over the state come in. And so there's a lot of different folks that are coming just to see what we're doing. And it's a good, I mean, a really good location, but it's also just a lot of good practices as well.
You mentioned Menominee High School, and I used to work there, so I appreciate that. So Gene D'Angelo and those guys, you know. But however, what about the rest of the county, since we're such a rural county? How are you going to be reaching out to those schools and 4-H and those different things?
Yeah, so I think this was just a start. We wanted to see if, number one, it would work. Of course, the field days that we have, come in, see what we do, learn about what we do is kind of our next step. We've done some of that in the past over the last lease agreement or the last 5 years. You know, some of that is logistics held us up from doing more of that, I think. We did have, like I said, the field days is probably our other, you know, big heavy hitter where we're drawing in a larger group of people.
And I would say UW Extension is a partner in this as well. So through their networks and Brent mentioned some of the research that's being done on this farm is also being shared statewide, but also within a local community too. So there's a number of ways. I don't know. There's probably so many we haven't even thought of too. But
Newsletter.
newsletter. We
They may
thought,
not know about your website. So.
Right.
how do you-
We've talked about signage and things with QR codes and updating websites and all of that. Actually, as a planning team, we've been talking about for the next 10-year plan, what that looks like and what our goals are. So, yeah, all those things are being considered. And like I said, there's always room for improvement no matter what we do. But
Do we have a local farm bureau? Do they call them farm bureaus here in Wisconsin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's Farmbury
And would they know
and
about
Farmers
this?
Union.
yeah, there's
Okay.
I'd like to just warn us not to get too far into the weeds. I mean, these are things that they're working on in general.
Mhm.
You know, what are we doing? So as far as getting specifics of what we want them to do day to day, let's kind of leave it to them to negotiate it.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. If I could just add, the reason that I knew about this was because of I covered, I was with the Dunn County News for a long time. And I covered, I think, more than one field day or special, there were a couple of special events. And I distinctly remember the trench that they, and you could see all the levels. And I have to say, that was one of the most fascinating things I had seen. You know, I've never seen a trench that deep, so it was really, really cool. So that was, you know, they have done outreach, at least in my time.
Without objection, how about if we move 7A endorsement of the lease up to now so that we can send people home a little quicker? I know Chase likes meetings, but Brent and you guys, you might not like it. It's okay? Okay, then, so let's go to 7A and endorsement of the CVTC land lease. And this means endorsement to go and negotiate it. And then after that, what happens? Come back here?
Staff would sign it after that. So
Okay.
this would be to endorse allowing staff to negotiate and sign the lease. So the lease is pretty much gone through legal counsel and almost ready to sign once this is endorsed.
if I could add, I think that's where it's at right now is, just tidy up a few things and, we're here to present this in the respect that it's pretty much ready to go.
Okay. In the past, we've always seen the lease.
I can bring it up on the screen if you want, or how do you want to, I guess I'll leave it up to you how you want to share it.
Well, it'd be kind of hard to go over now.
Yeah.
But could you send it to us? Yeah, I'd appreciate that. Yeah. Do the rest of you feel comfortable voting on it then? And passing it on for them to negotiate and finish up?
Will this eventually get to the county board supervisors or not, or?
No,
It
this
doesn't.
just goes through this committee
Just through this
as an endorsement for the land, since the money that the lease that we get from CVT goes to the neighbor's budget.
It does,
Mhm.
okay, that's good to know.
Well, I, for one, think it's a fantastic program, and I also have seen the ditch at different times, and it is a good picture. And relationships is what Chase and Brent were both talking about, and that's a key. So I think we need a motion for this to endorse the lease they're working on. Now, for them to go ahead and complete the lease, how should we word this?
Yeah, endorsement of continuing a lease with CVTC would probably be the best wording.
Okay, endorsement means we're for it. Okay, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to endorse it.
Supervisor Laufer, thank you. And Supervisor Lyons, seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? It passes. Thanks for coming in. It's always nice to hear about it. And we appreciate it. I think it's a great program. You guys too. Thanks for coming in.
All righty.
Well, before we go on to Carmen, thank you for the great comments. It's kind of new and learning stuff, and I've been here a while, but I still learned a lot each time. So it is a fantastic program. All right, Carmen, now you are on for sure.
All righty. So Quality Assurance Steering Committee updates, we go over this every month. We have had 2 meetings since the last meeting of this committee. So we went over our regular reports. One thing that our QA committee has been working diligently on is falls. So we haven't seen any sort of uptick or any significance in falls, but it was something that we wanted to work on and try to reduce the number of falls that we have, and primarily also reducing the number of falls with any injury. So we do have over 100 elderly people living with us. So falls happen. But the biggest thing is making sure that if a resident falls, that they are not getting hurt. So keeping them as safe as possible. And then also really addressing people that what we call our frequent fallers. So we do have people that fall regularly, whether that be due to their cognitive status, that they do not remember that they aren't capable of getting up on their own, or that they need to ask for help for things. Or it can be due to their physical capabilities of things changing day in and day out, that sometimes they may be capable and sometimes they're not. So that we do have people that are frequently falling. So we're really trying to address those individuals. Every time that we go through care plans, fall interventions, and things like that, we do them very specifically to why someone fell. So it's not just someone fell, we add this as an intervention. We really look down into the root cause of that. So that's something that our QA committee has been working on. And then Charles, our director of nursing, has started a separate falls committee that's reported at QA so that we can really look at how to prevent some of those falls. And when we have things like a falls committee, we look not only at nursing, we involve activities, because a lot of the times one of the reasons people fall is that they're bored. They get up and try to walk around. So we try to figure out different activities. So we've actually started seeing if we can have volunteers come in and just sit with people that are really active. They don't necessarily need anything, but if someone's just sitting there talking to them, they might not be as apt to get up and try to walk when they can't. So I'm really looking at some unique ways to prevent our residents from falling. So that has been probably our biggest initiative right now in our quality assurance committee. Any questions on that before I move on?
Have you seen, since you've been doing this, have you seen any marked improvement in the number of falls?
Yes, actually, not necessarily a number of falls. Falls with injury has gone down a little bit, which we really strive for no falls with major injury. So that would be like fractures, any sort of significant injury. And then the next step is fall with injury, which could be a skin tear or a bruise or things like that. So something minor, but still an injury. So we have seen a decrease in that. The hard part is there are some people we're just not going to prevent from falling. They have 30 different interventions on their care plan to prevent falls. And that's where we really transition to, okay, we're not going to be able to keep them from falling, but how do we keep them from getting hurt? So we have seen some improvements in that.
Supervisor Story?
Thank you. Yes, having experienced the neighbors with my husband, there was a concern that I did have. And if you were at the end of the hall and there was a fall, the word was is that the staff was going to try and do what they could to get around every 2 hours to see all the different people so that they could check on people. So there was that concern, especially in my husband's case, where he might want to be inclined to not press the button or would be inclined to want to try and get out of bed on his own. And if he did that, especially given location, nobody would really know that he was on the floor for a while. And I remember asking about cameras, and I wanted you to maybe explain to me again why we're not able to utilize those at all, and what the rules are about that.
Sure. So we cannot have cameras in resident rooms due to dignity and privacy concerns. There are a lot of things that happen in a resident's room that involves personal cares that we do not we are not able to have recorded. So the only place that nursing homes are allowed to have cameras is in common areas. So that really wouldn't help with in-room falls. We do try to have anybody that is at a high fall risk. So we do assessments that gives us if they're likely to fall, if they are a risk at falling, if they are a frequent faller. We do attempt to have those people closer to the central nurses station and have people that may not have falls, either aren't capable of getting up on their own at all, are very capable and probably not going to fall on the ends. We do check on people every 2 hours is the standard minimum. If someone is a fall risk, we also have one of our interventions is to check more frequently. We have some residents that are on 15-minute checks. So it really depends on the person, and that's kind of back to the very specific to each person's needs. Like if we have someone who likes to crawl out of bed at night, gripper socks isn't going to fix that as an intervention, but a mattress next to the bed might. So it really depends on the person, but we are not able to have cameras in rooms just for dignity purposes. Residents get their clothes changed, they have personal cares, showers, things like that in the rooms. So.
If it's a dementia situation though, and the family wanted to have that, is it still possible for that to take place?
It really depends. So that is something that we would have our ombudsman involved in, which is a person that go between the facilities and with residents. There are things that was a huge push with nanny cams kind of things a few years ago. So if we don't know it's happening, it probably has happened that families have them. But we really encourage to not have that as, again, personal cares are being done and that is invading the privacy of the resident. Even if the family says we want that, it also depends on their POA status. So if a family were to ask us about that, we would have the ombudsman involved just to make sure that we are following all of the specific.
Do you ever see
regulations.
that nobody's ever asked that?
We had some questions about it at the beginning of COVID, and that was actually a really big regulatory issue was that they made iPad-like things that just came on in the room, and it became a dignity issue. But in terms of the nanny cams, we have not had anyone ask of that, at least not recently. But the screens that came on were a problem because basically how they worked is say you had a loved one in a facility that isn't able to pick up a phone or something and you wanted to visit them, when you called, you just popped up on the screen. And it could have been when they were being bathed. It could have been when they were in the bathroom, things like that. So that brought up a lot of significant concerns about privacy and dignity. So we made sure that those settings were turned off and things like that, that if they wanted to, they should call us first and we can tell them like, hey, they're clothed and in their chair and things like that, so that we weren't having dignity concerns. Because
Let me back up and basically say that my experience at the neighbors was a good experience. However, that was a concern that we did have. And I think there was something about alarms on the beds too. I don't recall that they were very loud, but
we are an alarm-free facility, so we do not have any alarms. So the only alarm that we may have is a motion sensor outside of rooms, and those are typically in situations where someone could potentially be a harm to somebody else. So especially in a dementia household, we sometimes have residents that we are concerned with the safety of other residents. Sometimes we do one-on-one cares for those people. And then there's other times that we would have like a motion sensor on the outside of their door that just notifies staff that they're up and moving around, go assist them so that they don't go in another resident's room, things like that. But we do not have bed alarms or chair alarms. There's actually some significant research that alarms do not prevent falls. They actually just notify you that someone fell. So if you think about the loud noise of those alarms, if you've ever heard them in a hospital or in nursing homes in years back, they're pressure related. So you sit on them or you lay on them, and then when you stand up, that's when they alarm. So that loud pinging noise of and the elderly person hears it, they whip around to see what is that, and then they actually fall. So there's actually quite a bit of research that says that they actually increase falls. They just notify you that someone had fallen.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Supervisor Lawfer.
Going along with what Sheila was just talking about, my brother and sister-in-law have installed cameras in their maternity pen out in the barn so that they can watch the cow at night during the nighttime, so they don't have to go back out to the barn to watch or have a calf or whatever.
Mhm.
If a family wanted to put their own camera at their own expense and everything, and they could watch their loved one during the night. Because I've had friends that actually got up during the middle of the night and fell and really hurt themselves, broke bones and everything in a care facility.
Mhm.
And if there was if they could do that and it was agreed upon, could they at their own expense put those cameras in just so that they could watch? That way they could call if they saw their loved one doing something, they could call the facility and let them know, hey, could you go down and check on them or something?
Yeah, it depends on the situation because it depends on the person's POA status as well. It's power of attorney. So if they are activated, which means that 2 doctors have deemed them incompetent. So if there is not an activated POA, that's an absolute no, because that resident is their own person and they make the decisions for themselves versus their family. And then after that, it also does go down to the dignity portion of it. So that's what I was talking about, getting the ombudsman involved. We have not had families request that recently at all. The last time was those COVID camera situation kind of things, which were more for visiting purposes when we were closed to visitors. But if that did come up as a question, we would get the ombudsman involved because there is some pretty strict regulations on it of personal dignity because of the sensitive things that happen in residence rooms in terms of being cleaned up and showered and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on quality assurance?
That's the most questions we've had on QA
Yeah,
for
it is.
a long time. But you were talking about falls, and we all know about them.
Yep.
So, thank you.
All right, and I have Chris online for the employment activity report.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So I'm covering August and September in this report since we didn't meet in September. So the types of recruitments remain the same. We skip down to the next section. Obviously, it's 2 months worth of interviews. So we had 12 direct hire interviews. Out of those, 11 positions are offered, 11 positions are accepted. And then 1 was accepted higher than a step 3. If we go to agency interviews, we did have 4 agency interviews during that time, and they were all for CNAs. If we skip down to the next section, resignation reasons, they're listed there. Nothing bad, just kind of the normal attrition. If we go down to open positions, those that have been adjusted by people hiring and kind of the offboarding, onboarding activities. No work comp lost hours, and then for August, September, for shifts missed due to COVID-19 positives, 26. So for 2 months, it was a little higher than normal, but.
Any questions for Chris? Okay, then, Chris, that was easy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, next is CNA training program. I don't have a ton of updates on that besides that we have another class starting on 11/11. So we've had a pretty steady flow of classes for the CNA training program out of Arrowhead. In addition to the in-house training, we have also had an increase in the number of students from CVTC that come and do their clinicals with us to the point that we have actually had them in all 3 buildings at the same time. We try not to overwhelm households because when we have the CNA students doing clinicals and then we have nurses and CVTC CNA students, and it's a lot. So it is work for our staff to help teach them. So we try not to overwhelm our staff as well. And then also it's a lot for our residents. So more people is good. Too much people is a little chaotic. And it does sometimes stress people out a little bit when the households are a little bit of chaos. So we try to spread them out across campus. And we have had times recently where there is at least one class in all 3 buildings. So all good things of training some healthcare workers. So we're happy about that. Any questions on CNA training?
Nope.
All right. We'll go to resident referral report. So that is also in your packets. 2 months worth again for this. So I'll go over, I'll just do both. So August, we started the month with 101 residents. We had 56 referrals. We had 11 actually admitted to the neighbors, and then we had 45 not admitted. We did have a significant chunk of COVID in both August and September. It kind of filtered through the whole campus, whether it be staff or there were a couple of residents, but it seemed like we'd get completely clear and then another household outbreak and then we'd be completely clear. And it all depends on where they are, whether we can take admissions then, because if it is where we have an open bed, we can't admit. So it was a little bit of chaos of changing around where people were going, where we had holes and things like that. So we were a little bit lower in August. And then in September, we started with 104. We had 63 referrals, 10 were admitted. We had 53 not admitted. We ended at the end of the month with the same, which is 104. We had one resident that transferred to another facility. We had one resident who passed away, and then we had 5 discharged. We did have one resident leave AMA, which is against medical advice. That doesn't happen often, but that is someone that we do not think is ready to go home, but they decide otherwise, which is their choice to do so. But we do have them sign off that we are not discharging them, they are discharging themselves for liability reasons, as well as there are a lot of things that have to happen during a discharge. They have to be seen by a doctor. We have to do a bunch of assessments. We have to make sure that all services are set up for them after their discharge. So if they're going to an assisted living, we organize that for them. If they are discharging home, we make sure that they have all the things that they need at home, whether that be equipment, services that come from other agencies, whether that be home health care, wound care, if they have oxygen at home. A lot of that goes into a discharge. If they leave AMA, that most likely hasn't happened yet. So we can't guarantee that they're set up for success at home. So we make sure that that's signed off on because that is looked at when we have state surveyors come to us to make sure that we are doing discharge processes properly. So if we didn't have them sign off on that, it would look like we dropped the ball on that discharge. So it does happen every once in a while, not commonly. We'll actually have another one of those coming this month. We just had someone leave AMA this week. So that does happen, but not often. So I wanted to point that out. I will say we have seen an uptick in admissions. Knock on wood, we've been COVID free for a little bit. So we are at 110 census right now. So that is nearly full to our current staffing ratios because of having only Deerview and half of Fireside open in Central. East and West are basically full. I believe they each have one room open in their memory care households, which we fill specifically with people with memory care needs. So we have gone down our waiting list for memory care, which has a separate waiting list because different needs for those households, and just waiting to fill those 2 beds. Any questions on referrals or census?
I know you probably told us this before. What does AMA stand for?
Against medical advice.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. I will move on to environmental and facilities reports, and Scott is here to do that.
Good morning. So for the last 2 months then, reporting, we had your typical HVAC repairs that Brady has worked on, keeping things cooler, now moving toward keeping things warmer, working on typical work orders and preventive maintenance. The mowing season finished up and now moving toward the fall and winter season, getting things ready for all that. We had on October 10th was Day of Caring event with United Way, and volunteers came, working with Alyssa. A lot of the flower gardens were cleaned up, raised flower beds that had been kind of rickety and rotten. Those were removed and taken out of there. They worked really well. A lot of volunteers over at the neighbors to get a lot of that stuff cleaned up and taken care of. Really was a very good event. A lot of volunteers. We had them at other buildings for Dunn County also, and had some tasks for them to do. Really worked out well. We worked with Highway Department, had some sidewalks replaced. Places where sidewalks were broken out, edges, stuff like that. And also some spots where elevations, sidewalk sections had been lower than others. Back probably, I don't know what year it was done, but there was some mud jacking that was done. We did look at those. The ones that had been mud jacked in the past did settle back down. So working with Highway, it was a better way to go is replacing sidewalk panels. So they took the concrete out, and then they filled in gravel, compacted that really well, poured in new concrete. Some places they actually pinned to the one next to them so that there's rebar in there, so they're not going to settle down like the old ones had. So that went really well. They got in there and did all that. And then a couple of my facility workers worked on filling black dirt alongside the sidewalks and getting some rock alongside areas where there was lower areas of rock next to the sidewalks, so that residents won't go off into the lawn and have a difference in level there. So we'll address that again in the spring to see how much that is settled, fill in where we need to, and do some more seeding as needed. Looking at that, Carmen has the East survey on the agenda. I'll give the life safety portion of that. So on September 25th was the survey in the East building. All in all went very well, especially Brady being on vacation. We took on the survey without him, gave him his vacation. He had all the documentation all ready to go. Very nice for the state engineer to look through, organized. Went very well through that. We went and did the walkthrough. East building, there was, so there's black gates, fence and gates outside of a couple of the doors. Those have locks on them, and that was one of the things that was cited, is to disable those locks. Making that is an exit. There's not enough area outside of the building door in the fenced in area to consider that an area to exit to. So you have to have the gate unlocked so that you can get out of there and it's an exit. So now that is, the locks are disabled and those are labeled as exits. So we got that taken care of, and Carmen got the plan of correction submitted for all that. A couple other mentions they had were just, there was a keypad that we found that I think is something that was left over from the lightning strike in May. When the engineer and I went to open the door and use the keypad, it wouldn't disarm the alarm. So had Brady look at that. He took care of that. That's all fixed up and ready to go. There was no sight on that. And then the other mention was about sprinkler heads, that some of the sprinkler heads were, especially exterior ones, needed to be cleaned more often. There's a little bit of dirt on them. So we're stepping up the cleaning of those, make that more of a routine. That is all I have. So our survey went well. Things been moving along well.
I really love it when it's boring. No, the
do.
surveys, I mean, the surveys.
I love it when it's pouring too.
I have a question. You have one, Tim?
I do.
Yeah, you go ahead, Supervisor Laufer.
How many people do you have that you're in authority over that work underneath you to take care of the facility?
Yeah, the neighbors.
Yes.
So I have a facilities maintenance specialist, I have a facility worker, and then 2 part-time custodians that are always at the neighbors.
So there's 5 of you that,
There are 4 and then myself.
okay,
Yep.
okay. Thank you.
And as needed, Scott's other staff do come over and help
Yep.
at the neighbors as well. So if there's a bigger project like the sidewalks,
Yep.
the highway did the actual concrete cement stuff, but then Scott's staff came and did the dirt. That was also other facilities staff too. So if there's bigger things or if one of them's sick or on vacation, there's always extra people at the neighbors too.
So I'm just curious, when you have work done like the cement work, does the highway department charge the neighbors just like they might charge a township or whatever?
Yes.
How about the same thing for coming in with the extra workers from, like to fill in the dirt alongside theirs?
Yes, my staff, their wages their time is billed
Okay.
to the neighbors, yes.
Yeah, we pay a monthly bill to facilities that's based on what they do and things that they buy for us or whatnot. If they need a new hammer or something, that's at the neighbors.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, great, Scott. That's good job.
In addition to Scott's report, I did want to have one other thing under environmental and facilities. We recently had a family concern about the loudness of fire alarms. So Brady and I did some investigation on how loud they were and things like that because wanting to make sure that we followed up on it. So Brady had a decibel reader. So we did a couple of tests. We went to Arrowhead and did a test there so that we wouldn't disrupt residents by setting off alarms more than necessary. And it read under the legal limit, which is 120 decibels, and it read at 103. So that was above the minimum and below the maximum. So we were happy with that. And then actually in an active household, there was another fire drill that had to be ran yesterday. And Bob, our other facilities person, checked the decibel and it was 106. So we were within compliance for those. So just wanted to mention that as well, that was followed up on as a facilities concern. And fire drills are a requirement. We are required to do them regularly and we are required to do them on different shifts. So they actually have to be no more than an hour apart. So every hour of the day has to be accounted for throughout the year. And we do not set them off at night. There is a fire test run. We do a drill with the staff at night. But then we just test the fire alarm in the morning to make sure the alarm works, but we don't set it off at 2 a.m. to wake everybody up. But
Oh.
yeah.
Do you have to take residents out of the rooms or anything when you're doing those?
It depends on the drill. So typically what we do is that we have one room that is marked as fire. So we have little signs that say this is a room on fire. We pull the fire alarm, basically act as though that's a room on fire. We evacuate the area that's right by it out. A lot of our residents aren't in their rooms all day, so a lot of times they're not in there. We close all the doors. We make sure that all the hallways are clear so that there's no lifts or bins or anything in the hallways. Staff call 911. We pre-tell them that this is going on so that they don't send the fire department out, because our system is set up that once a fire alarm is pulled, it notifies our 24-hour monitoring company that then also notifies 911. So if it gets pulled randomly, not by a resident, which has happened, the fire department just gets deployed. In this scenario, Brady tells them in advance, hey, we're doing a fire drill. Please don't respond. And then they also go down the whole list of they notify Brady or the on-call phone, even though he's obviously doing the fire drill, but we make staff go through the process. They call me. I'm normally there at the fire drill, but they make sure that they go through the list so that we are prepared for in the case that there is an actual fire.
Good. I'm continually amazed at all the details that have to go on, from clearing out the hallways,
Mhm.
from parts to everything else.
Yep.
And you have to keep practicing it so that it's just normal.
Yep.
Well, that's kind of nice to hear. Thanks for asking about that.
And fortunately, we haven't had, knock on wood, we haven't had any major fires or anything like that, but we have had situations where the fire alarms have gone off. Sometimes it's been in the summer when it's been very humid. It set fire alarms off. We had a situation that one of the above ceiling HVAC systems, heating systems, was smoking. So there was no actual fire, but it did set the system off. So when that stuff happens, our staff has responded appropriately, and that is due to fire drills. So when we have had instances where they've needed to respond, they have always done it how they're supposed to. So the drills do work.
Yeah. Cool.
All right.
Okay, then, oh boy, we get to go on G, Medicaid rates.
Yeah. So over the past couple of months, you've heard Jane and I talk a lot about we had interim rates. So frequently, the state issues what are called interim rates, which are basically their best guess at what your rate's going to be, which is based on our cost reports and all of those things. They issue them so that we can still be paid during that time frame, but it's kind of with the caveat of this might change. So then sometimes we have to pay them back sometimes they pay us a large chunk more. But our goal is hoping that those interim rates are pretty close to what they're going to be, because then it's easier for forecasting, budgeting, all of those things. So we did get our final rates for this current term of our Medicaid rates, and they were extremely close to what our interim rates were. So that's actually nice. It is always nice when they're like, oh, here's a extra $30 a day or whatnot, a happy surprise. But all in all, for budgeting and forecasting purposes, when they're close, that's best. So they were roughly $2 off. So we can't really ask for much closer than that. So they are all kind of what we expected. So we are happy with that. They are all different, as we've explained in the past, that each building gets a different rate. Central's rate is a lot higher than the other two, and that is due to some allocation things, which we are working on to improve going forward. Because, for example, if you're dividing out the cost of Central to each resident is a lot more expensive than the cost of East and West, since our census is lower. So we are working on allocating things a little bit more accurately. And Jane has been doing that in SAP, of making sure that, for example, my salary isn't split in thirds. It is split by number of residents, so that Central doesn't seem to cost more, things like that. Because before, when all three buildings were pretty equally filled, it made more sense to just split everything in thirds. But now we're really focusing in on cost, so that it doesn't throw off one of the rates. Any question on Medicaid rates?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay, and then we'll talk about East annual survey. So Scott talked about the life safety code portion of this. We'll talk about the health portion of this. And I'm trying to remember if this group has been through an annual survey or not yet. I don't think so. I know I've talked about surveys quite a bit, but I think West, or no, it would have been East survey last time. I don't think we've been, Central was our last one, and that was before April. So when we have an annual survey, they come in and they say, we're here for your annual inspection. There's normally 3 to 5 surveyors, kind of depending on the time, how many they send out. I don't really know if there's a rhyme or reason for it, but normally 3 to 5 surveyors. Sometimes there's 1 or 2 in training, stuff like that. And they kind of look at everything. So we've talked about complaint surveys before, as well as self-report surveys. Those are really looking at just that one thing. overall surveys look at everything. So they will come in and they will watch meal pass. They will watch medication pass. They will review all of our records of things. They talk to every resident that they can. That is the majority of their survey is resident and family interviews. That has changed over the years. Prior to 2018, when some rules changed, they used to do more of staff interviews. They would come and they would kind of drill staff on what's the policy on this? How do you do this? And now it's way more focused, on resident interviews. So, which is a good thing because that truly is what we drive everything by as well, is making sure our residents are safe, happy, and healthy. And so then they go and they ask residents questions about their care, how they think things are going, if they have concerns. And then based on those interviews, that's what they then look deeper into. So, for example, this wasn't in the East survey, but say a resident said the food's always cold. They might then go and check our food temp logs. So they don't necessarily cite you just because a resident said something, but it gives them kind of the direction of what they should look at. So for the East survey, we had 4 citations, which were all minor citations, nothing that rose to a level of harm or anything like that. 3 of the 4 were very one-off situations. One was a little bit more in depth, which was our infection control tag. That is the #1 cited citation because it really encompasses everything. So it can involve hand washing, it can involve glove changing, it can include policies, it can include COVID, it can include everything. So that's a really big citation. So we had a couple of examples under that. That was one was a nurse that was doing cares. She washed her hands before putting gloves on and after she was done with the cares, but she did change her gloves in the middle of the process and didn't want use hand sanitizer in between. So that was part of it. It's part of the policy. So it was a very one-off. Nurse was educated. Nothing happened. There is something with what's called enhanced barrier precautions, which is a new regulation regarding having special precautions for anyone that is at risk of developing any sort of drug-resistant infection. So that'd be anyone that has history of that or anyone that has things like indwelling catheters, wounds, stuff like that. They wanted us to change part of our policy on that. This was our first survey since that became a regulation, so our policy hadn't been reviewed by them yet. So we changed part of our policy on that. And then we also had a lift that wasn't wiped down. The surveyor didn't see the lift being wiped down after it was used. The staff said they did it once they brought it back to the closet. They didn't see them do that. So re-education on all of those things. So that was the bigger one, was the 880, which is the number of the tag for infection control. The other 3 citations were very minor one-offs. One was oxygen tubing that didn't have a date written on it. They must be dated. So there wasn't proof of when it was changed last, but there wasn't an outdated, but it just wasn't dated. One was a staff member standing up to assist a resident with eating. So when we assist a resident with eating, staff are to sit down and sit next to them instead of standing over them. So we got a citation for that. The staff member involved was re-educated. And then the last citation, which was extremely one-off, and normally we typically see things that they say kind of like FYIs, re-educate, don't do it again kind of thing. We did not receive any FYIs. Everything that they saw, we got a citation for. So in the last one was, there is a screen that is called the PASSAR screen. It is done by our social services staff, and it basically is a screening that tells us if we need to provide additional services for any sort of mental illness or mental health illness. So if a resident comes in and they require to pass our screen, our staff do that. It gets charted, all of those things. It is also part of our MDS process, which is the minimum data set, which is that very, very cumbersome, long assessment that we do for all residents that basically tells us the care levels they need, and then it also links to reimbursement. On that MDS, there is a question that asks, is a pass-our screen needed? It was accidentally checked no. The resident did need a pass-our screen. The pass-our screen was done. So the resident had everything that they needed and the staff did everything they needed to do, but they misclicked a button. So we received an inaccuracy of MDS citation. So those were our 4. For reference, the state average and national averages for citations is normally around 7 to 9 citations. So 4 minor citations is still much better than average. It's just a little bit hard for us because we are used to 1 or none. So 4 still seemed a little bit much for us, but it is well above average. Any questions about the East Annual Survey? Okay.
Doesn't look like it.
In addition to that, just while we're talking about survey, we did actually have a complaint survey yesterday, or a self-report survey. There was not a family complaint. It was just a self-report. I know we've talked about those in the past. We submit reports when something happens. They came in to review one of those, and there was no issues found and no citations, and we left with it being unsubstantiated. So that was all good, but since that just happened yesterday, I thought I would mention it as well. And that was in our west building. Are there any other questions for me? Otherwise, that concludes my report.
It doesn't look like it. Do we have Jane with us today?
I will be giving the facilities report. Jane is out sick. Or the facilities, the finance report. Sorry.
Yeah. Everybody get some really hard questions ready for her.
Okay, so we'll go through the packet. So it looks like the campus aging report is first in the packet. So Jane reports on this every month, but this is basically our due to us claims. So the best is when those current ones, that light blue bar on the bottom is the biggest, which it is. So we are happy with that. There is a couple claims that are up in those higher sections. That is somewhat due to VA billing. We have had more VA claims, which is one of those that takes a little longer to bill sometimes. They always do pay us though, so that is good. And then the over 365 days has really shrunk. So that is either due to some collections, as well as we have had some write-offs for claims that we know we are not going to be able to collect on. Things like divestment situations that we know we won't be able to collect on. So I know Jane's staff has been cleaning up some of those things, but right now the aging looks pretty good, with the majority of them being current claims.
Any questions? Next up.
All right, we'll look at census. So this August and September census was a little bit down for a few things. We already talked about that in the referral report. That was primarily due to not filling because of COVID. So we will see a little bit more of that come back up for October. We are meeting most of the metrics. Medicaid is obviously below the line. Medicaid is currently our best payer, Medicare and Medicaid. I know that is a big mind shift from when private pay used to be what we would hope for, but Medicaid does pay well now. So we are filling as many beds as we can with anyone we can. Any questions on census? Okay.
Well, let's,
Go ahead.
we have, yeah, the next one up, you're gonna do the financials here.
Yep.
But before you go through it, let's just look at the entire neighbors of Dunn County.
Alrighty, so that's the first. Go
And
ahead.
does anybody have any questions first? So Carmen can focus on anything we have here.
Are we still on track for what you had projected we would have for a profit this year or whatever?
Yes, we are.
Okay, thank you.
In fact, the last report we got projected profit of 456, and now it's 576. 120 better.
Yes, so that is back to when we were talking about the Medicaid rates, that is almost completely due to our Medicaid rates being increased. So that is something that we have been asking the state for as long as I've been a nursing home administrator and many years before that. So that is something that we're very happy with, and it is allowing us to have a profit, which then goes back to the many years that we did not have profits. And then the biggest line that we always look at too is actually that net without depreciation, because that's our true cash, cash in, cash out. Obviously, we do still count depreciation as an enterprise fund. So that 576 is true net, including depreciation. And then actually below that, the $1,284,904 would be the actual expenses versus revenue. So yes, we are still looking like it is going to be a good year. Is there any questions or anything else you want me to specifically look at on the financials? Okay. If not, I will go just to highlight the agency staff report. So we do look at this every month of looking at agency staff, the cost. Obviously, they are more expensive than our normal staff. And then we also do compare out the actual total cost of nursing staff. So that includes our nursing in-house staff as well as our agency staff. We have had a decrease in our agency staffing, which is great. We have had some internal staffing that has increased, as well as we have had some agency staff become internal staff. So that is something we can do. It depends on our contract with the agencies. So we do have a couple of different agencies, and it is typically based on how long they've been with us. So they do have to complete a certain amount of contracts or weeks with us under the agency. We can't just poach people the second they get to us. And typically this has happened with one of the companies that we work very closely with, and we have the most of their staff with us compared to other ones. So they trust us that we're not just taking all of their staff, but we had a couple of individuals that want to stay. They're originally from the South, and they have been here as an agency and employees for almost 2 years, both of the staff that just started as internal. And so they had requested it. We worked with the agency to make sure that we weren't breaching any contracts with them, because one of the things that does happen if facilities do poach, for lack of a better term, staff, we end up paying a payout to them, a buyout, which we are not doing. These staff are coming to us without having to do the buyout, and they are working internally. It was actually comical because these employees are people who want to work a lot of hours. So they were working a lot of overtime as agency staff, which is even more expensive. So now they're working a lot of overtime as internal staff, which is cheaper for us. And payroll questioned, I think the first time one of them that went through internal payroll, she had some crazy number of hours for 2 weeks, and payroll was like, is this accurate? And we're like, yep, she wants to work. We schedule her for a regular full time, and then she picks up open shifts as she wants. So it's been very good to have a couple of people stay with us long term.
Carmen, do they say why they want to? Is there something about here as opposed to where they were coming from that makes them want to stay?
Yeah, we have heard several comments that facilities up in the northern part of the country are a lot better than some in the southern part of the country. Working conditions, as well as number of residents that they care for. Staff to resident ratios are a lot different. They haven't told us any like specific places, but just in general, as well as supplies, the niceness of the facilities themselves, the buildings, things like that. We've heard lots of comments about that, as well as some of them just like living here, different area, things like that. So we've been very happy to keep a couple of employees.
Yeah, thank you. I like that report with breaking out LPNs and RNs and CNAs. And I got to look at it carefully each time, relearn what it means, but I really like it.
Good.
So thank you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't surprise me people want to stay here, especially when you start comparing ours to a lot of private ones.
Mhm.
But okay.
Not to mention the weather.
Yeah. That is always something. We have had some people come from the south that didn't own winter coats. So we've had comments about that, but some of them really do enjoy it here. The next section is the senior meals. That is still on track. So as a reminder, we don't try to make necessarily money on senior meals. It is more about breaking even as a service to the county, as it is just the county paying us for it too. So it's intergovernmental transfers, and we try to keep that at baseline. And then the last thing is the vouchers in the packet. If there's any questions of any of the vouchers or of any of the things that are in there, I can explain what they might be. Otherwise, that is
So-
the report.
Any questions on the vouchers?
What is provider assessment?
Provider assessment.
It's under administration.
Yep. So every year we submit a annual report to the state, and then it comes with fees, as well as bed tax is also included in there. So basically we pay the state to continue a licensure as well as to license the beds.
Oh.
Any other questions for me?
Approval.
I'll second it.
I move approval of the voucher.
Would you like to include, along with the vouchers, the financial reports?
Yes, I can do that.
And I'll be happy to second that as well.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion to approve the vouchers and financial reports on the table. Any discussion? Don't see any. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? None. Thank you. That covers everything except the next meeting time and so forth.
We need to discuss the next meeting time as our regularly scheduled meeting is on Thanksgiving.
Yes.
So, I can pull up the public meeting calendar, to compare other county meetings.
You're gonna have turkey here.
Well, that would make a difference, wouldn't it?
There's not a lot of them scheduled.
Thursday, Thanksgiving Day. Oh. And then, of course, we're the third weekend, aren't we?
We're the fourth
Fourth,
normally.
normally, so that's Christmas.
Yep,
So do we meet in the beginning of December for
both.
both?
It's a good idea. It's a great idea. Save some money too.
Okay, then.
Okay. Looking at the public meeting calendar, there is if we want to do a Thursday, there is nothing on the 5th, 12th, or 19th.
Oh, so what do you folks think? Okay, so you've got something on the 5th? The 12th or the 19th?
12th?
Let's see, and it's good for you, you said, Jen? 12th is good for me. And it's after the executive committee. I don't think that makes any difference. No, okay. Sheila, how about you?
Fine.
Oh, that was easy.
Yeah.
The 12th then?
Okay, at 9 o'clock again? Okay.
9 AM, the 12th. Wow. Okay, Any other announcements or anything you want to say?
The only other thing I had is that this month is the neighbors, or November is the neighbors report for county board. So you will hear our annual report at that as well.
Okay. And Alyssa Doty is no longer Alyssa Doty.
Correct. She is Alyssa Stelter.
And she's the one that gave us the report on, what do you,
Life enhancement.
life enhancement. And all the different things they do. Last time. Yeah. So we are adjourned.